Well, thank you all for coming out for our fourth annual Shapiro Distinguished Lecture on Global Climate Change and Energy Law. This is a series that's near and dear to my heart. I joined GW Law in July of 22, and this lecture parallels my time at GW Law. So our first annual lecture was launched in fall of 22, and we've featured very distinguished speakers from all over the world. From our first lecture was in speaker from Doha, Qatar, and second year we had one from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, and last year was Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark. And this year we're privileged to have our fourth annual lecturer from Bogota, Colombia. So I want to briefly introduce today's lecturer and our speaker, and then we'll hear from our distinguished guest. We will have a reception immediately following the lecture here in the FCC from 1:30 to 2:30. You will have an opportunity for Q&A after the lecture today. So my name is Randall Abate. I'm the Assistant Dean for Environmental Law Studies here at GW Law, and it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest lecturer for today, our fourth annual Shapiro lecturer, Lyndon Winston Jay Huffington. So I met Lyndon 2 years ago. He has graciously hosted me for lectures at his university, Externado, in Bogota, in 2023 and 2025. We are in the process of trying to collaborate on research projects, faculty-student exchange between our schools. So that's a work in progress, and we have this event today and a lunch tomorrow where there's extensive opportunities for collaboration with our faculty at the law school, at the university, and the DC community. So we're really trying to make this more than a one and done opportunity. One special note is we've, as I mentioned, have had 3 prior distinguished lecturers. And this is the first year, though, that a lecturer has traveled with an entourage. 2 of Lyndon's former students traveled from Bogota and from Buenos Aires, sitting behind him here, to join him for today's lecture. I don't yet have that kind of fan club, but I'm glad that he does, and want to extend a special welcome to his 2 former students for joining us today. We also have many attendees online from Bogota and elsewhere in Latin America joining us today throughout the US. So to give you a bit of background on Lyndon, really what I would characterize as a rising star in the fields that are the focus of this event, energy, environmental, and mining law. We've got someone who has got a very distinguished educational background in these fields, was a scholarship recipient to receive his LLM from the University of Melbourne in Australia, an outstanding institution. He is currently very hungry for more, to add initials to his name and his credentials. He is currently pursuing a PhD and an MBA to add to that LLM credential and his initial law degree. So he's certainly a very ambitious and accomplished academic. He is widely published on these topics. He is a speaker in many countries, and at that stage of my career, I was just happy to have a few speaking gigs in the US, but Lyndon has traveled throughout Latin America to the UK, Spain, and now the US for speaking engagements on his areas of expertise. You'll note from the cover of our program that the subject for today is quite dynamic. So it's not just about the environmental and energy and climate intersection, but we've got an interesting new dimension compared to our previous year's lectures. Mining is something that we haven't yet covered in this lecture series, and that's an area of expertise for Lyndon. He is actually holds a title in that space. He is the coordinator of the Energy Transition Observatory at Externado and is actively involved in this mining and energy intersection that we're going to hear about today. But also, quite uniquely, is the connection to artificial intelligence. This is certainly getting a lot of attention in US practice and literature in the environmental and energy space. I'm sure you've heard some things about the outsized carbon footprint of artificial intelligence, but this is certainly the first time I've heard about artificial intelligence as a potential game changer for environmental justice. So I'm all ears to hear what our special guest has to share with us today, and it's a great honor to call him to the podium and launch our fourth annual Shapiro lecture. And I will give you the 10-minute warning, and then we will transition to question and answer. So please keep your questions until the end, and we'll have a robust Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Allen. Thanks. So, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much, Professor Randall, for this wonderful introduction. I think it goes beyond everything I've been doing, but I really appreciate the invitation to be here in George Washington University, for you to be fighting against your lunch timing and to be here with us talking about something that may be interesting for some, but that will show us during this conversation the challenges we are facing in Latin America, and the important position and the important necessity to start talking about the role of artificial intelligence as a solution for criminal practices such as illegal mining in our jurisdiction. So, also I want to thank Claudia and Giovanna, who's back there, for all the help during these days and the logistics for making it possible to have me here today. So I have this agenda for you today, which I hope you like. First, talking about the clean energy transition as that very nice highlight, very interesting topic. And then seeing how energy transition can be linked at some point with criminal activities as illegal mining in Latin America, and how artificial intelligence in applied cases are being a response and a solution for tackling, surveilling, and monitoring criminal activities in our jurisdictions. Finally, I'd just like to give some normative frameworks and policies. Of course, we are in part of one of the most important law schools in the world, so naturally we'll have to see what's happening there from the regulatory perspective, and also a future outlook and conclusions for this very short lecture, but I hope very insightful for you today here in this space. So let's start. Clean energy transition. So when we start talking about clean energy transition in Latin America, we start referring to some very specific legal instruments which are part of all the international environmental policies related to climate change and also to sustainable development. So first we'll find in 1992 the United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change, which states the climate action recognizing the importance of reducing, mitigating, and adapting to greenhouse gas emissions. Also, our Kyoto Protocol in 1997, introducing binding targets for developing countries and also sending that message of the importance of clean energy and diversification of the energy mix. The Paris Agreements in 2025, sharing this necessity to avoid getting to 1.5 or 2% degrees in order to avoid those catastrophic scenarios. And also the 2030 agenda of the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. This starts and marks a very important highlight because under SDG number 7, we start talking about the necessity to talk and to refer about universal access with affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy. And under these ideas of modern energy, we start talking about renewable energy and energy transition itself. We have also recent public policy or international policy guiding the pathway in the regulation in Latin America, such as the Glasgow Climate Pact and the Sharm el-Sheikh Implementation Plan from COP27 in 2022. So, which are our starting points in Latin America to be referring about energy transition? We have to recognize that between 1990 and 2010, the number of people with access to energy grew in 1.7 billion. But also that the demand for energy is still increasing year per year. For example, last year we had an increase in 3% of the demand for energy resources. Despite this situation, if we are in an undeveloped country, we'll see that 1 of 7 people don't have access to energy resources. And that person who don't have access to energy resources is particularly located in a rural area. That means it's very vulnerable communities who have none possibilities to develop energy resources in their jurisdictions. Also, it's important to highlight that energy is one of the major contributors to climate change. Our last report says that energy sector itself represents 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So that's something that we should be taking in mind in order to accelerate actions related to energy transition and diversification of our electric grid. And also, we who have energy consumption need to improve efficiency standards to reduce waste in energy facilities and also allow others to access energy in equal conditions. This point is very sensible. We have to think that 40% of the world population, that means 3 billion people, depends on polluting or unhealthy ways or fuels for cooking. And that have huge impacts in health, have huge impact in domestic contamination and pollution, and have huge impacts in particular and specific group of population, such as women. In our undeveloped countries, women are who are in charge of making our meals. And women are those who are standing the consequences and the health consequences of naturally cooking with very unhealthy fuels on a daily basis. So, SDG number 7 gives us a clear sign of where we should move. It says we should have affordable and clean energy. By affordable means, we shouldn't need to sacrifice other activities in order to pay our energy bills or have energy access within our jurisdictions. And for clean energy is a direct call that says we should not be using fossil fuels in order to produce energy in any scenario. So then we should go to natural resources such as the sun, such as the wind, such as hydropower, in order to fulfill the increase of the energy demands. So our key target to 2030 is to ensure universal access. That means everyone, doesn't matter where, should have the possibility to choose if they are having a connection or they're having a disconnection with energy resources. We should also guarantee access for affordable, reliable, and modern energy services. And also, we need to advance in the expansion of the infrastructure and the development of new technologies that guarantee that energy are always under the clean premises. So then we'll have a necessity to advance in decarbonization, a necessity to advance with development under justice considerations, and also a call for urgent climate action within all this pathway to the energy transition. So how we had faced this situation in Latin America? We call it the 6 Ds. So we need to work looking for decarbonization, reducing the carbon footprint of our energy grids. We need to work in decentralization, creating distributive scenarios where also the power should be closer to the consumption grids and not always in isolated areas. We're calling for digitalization, which means that technology should be part of the energy services, and in consequence, the development of technological expertise should also be a tool for decarbonizing the economies. Democratization, which means communities should be part of decision-making within the energy infrastructures. Deregulation, which means market should be open to competition and also recognizing that technology moves very faster than regulation. So we not always should be thinking on regulate when time technology answers are always in a different pathway. And last but not least, we talk about development. Necessarily, energy transition should be part of economic growth and guarantee clean energy investment in all jurisdictions in Latin America. Okay? So very quick, this is a recap of how we should be thinking this in Latin America, but I would just like to stop in one very specific point, which is referred to development. And this is very important to have in mind. Energy transition should not leave no one behind. Development in energy transition should be aligned with social, environmental, and governance structures, which mean development need to benefit all the segments in society. Under this pathway, we should be thinking about innovation ecosystems, capacity building programs, and institutional strengthening, because there is a reality in our jurisdictions. Mining and oil activities are major sectors in our economies. They provide jobs, they provide royalties, they provide services to our communities, or our vulnerable communities. So when we move in an energy transition pathway, there are people who are losing their jobs, there are royalties that are not being paid, and there is someone who have to replace those situations. So we need to complete and build a very strategic package where we reunite all the perspective and take into account environmental, economic, and social issues related to the energy transition. And there is where we start thinking, for instance, in reference as these, that says energy are now a human right. Is not something, is not related to comfort. For example, Sovakul and Dorkin explore saying that the lack of access to modern energy impede enjoyment of basic human rights, including health, education, economic opportunity, and human dignity. And if we go to these pictures that we have here, highlighting communities without energy services, we can start reflecting on the impact of not having available energy within our jurisdiction. So for example, here, the access to education, the access to health services, and the access to human right or cooking under human right conditions. So this is a picture of the reality in many of Latin American jurisdictions and in many of Latin America communities. On a daily basis, we'll see this picture that sometimes we see so far, but is part of our reality and is something we need to tackle directly from the energy conception itself. So all this sounds good, right? Everyone is agreed that we need to move that in that pathway? Who would say no or yes? Who would say yes? Hands up. Yes, energy transition is okay, clean and beautiful. But in Latin America, we have some little dirty secrets. And we're not talking today about corruption because it's part of it, yes. But it's something we have related to these 6 Ds, and it's called the hidden challenge for critical minerals. Okay? So we're going very slow into this concept in order to give you some thoughts about the importance of mining within the energy transition, and also the environmental impacts this is going to have in a mid, in a long term within our ecosystems. So we saw that we have 6 Ds that we need to move forward in, but there is one thing that is in the background of all the energy transition process. It's a process that have a high dependence on critical minerals. So for those who are not familiar with the critical minerals concept, critical minerals are those essential elements or compounds that are required for the development of clean energy facilities or clean energy technologies. And these have particular conditions because they are very scarce, they are very rare, and they have very risky or tricky supply chains. So they are produced in limited jurisdictions, and they are processed in limited jurisdictions. Under these ideas, definitely will need thinking how these minerals are going to meet the necessity for climate change and for energy transition particularly. So for example, Solar energy systems. Solar panels require silicon, indium, gallium, silver, tellurium, candium. Wind generation needs rare earths, dyspronium, additional to the traditional iron we need. For electrical vehicles, we need high demand in lithium, cobalt, manganese, nickel. For grid scale energy storage, we need vanadium. And all of these are part or are requiring more mineral extraction. So as we can see here in this picture that is shared by the International Energy Agency, the agency has been saying copper, lithium, nickel, and cobalt could be double or even triple in demand by 2040. And this is an unprecedented surge on demand that reflect the necessity of and the links between energy transition and also mining activities itself. So we need 6 times more mineral intensity to advance in the clean agenda. And we also need 30 more minerals to advance in essential elements that are part of the energy transition. So definitely, there is a huge paradox. And here we can see it. The world will continue extracting more minerals in the same pathway of the energy transition. And then we need to also take some examples, as this one we have here also from the International Energy Agency, that shows how many minerals are required for an electric vehicle versus a conventional car. So for a conventional car, we need basic 3 to 4 minerals in these proportions. And then for an electric car, we need this huge amount of diverse minerals in way larger proportions. So we need 6 times more minerals than a conventional car. And this means that during the demand for clean technologies, we are not escaping from mining. We are accelerating mining activities. Okay? So what else we have on the table in our little dirty secret? First, geographical concentration. Oil and gas networks, as we know them, are very diverse and they're all around the world available. But minerals and strategic or critical minerals are only available in certain jurisdictions. And second, there is a huge geopolitical risk. Countries who has the ownership of those minerals can make major decisions in the political or in the international relationships that could generate or create influence over decision-making, economic pathways, and also have incidence over global energy transition. And there is also a very important topic that is the market volatility. That means that our trade projects and trade restrictions or behaviors can also redefine the way and the advance or block of the development of energy transition programs. Okay? So let's go into a very clear example. If we are taking these 2 first elements, we'll see that they're fossil fuels. So fossil fuels, we're taking the top 3 producing countries of fossil fuels. So in fossil fuels, we'll see that for extractive industries, US, Saudi Arabia, and Russia are the main or the principal stakeholders in the value chain, in the supply chain. And for processing, we'll see that they are corresponding in some cases, but we have a diverse proportion where we can see other actors such as Qatar, such as, there we could see the Democratic Republic of Congo in certain cases, the US. And these behaviors means that there is a diverse context or a diverse economic relationship in where extraction not always correspond to processing of oil or natural gas. But when we get into the strategic or critical minerals, we'll see that there is a very specific list. So we have copper, nickel, cobalt, rare earths, and lithium. And these are part, or they can be extracted from certain jurisdictions. So for example, in Chile, we have a lot of copper, lithium in Australia, but now we are seeing the importance of Latin America with the triangle of the lithium between Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. Also, we can see rare earths in China and cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But when we go to processing, which is this part, you can see that there is a principal actor in the processing and the conversion and the development of energy technologies or renewable energy technologies. So always in the head front, we'll see China with a huge advantage in technological and economical development regarding to the processing of these minerals. So there is where we see that critical minerals have a single source dependence that create vulnerability and also can put in jeopardy the electric worldwide system. Okay? Clear so far? We're going good? Okay. So, also, this picture is very indicative. If we go to oil and gas, we see that there are diverse countries in the pathway of upstream, midstream, and consumption. But then when we go to clean technologies, we see that the mining of these resources or primary materials are focused in many of our Latin American jurisdictions or undeveloped countries. The processing is linked directly to China, and also there are different stakeholders or participants in the different facilities for power generation, solar panels, wind turbines, or wind installation, but they're also limited and defined by countries themselves. So this situation creates emerging power dynamics in which certain partners are establishing the rules of the game, and some are also establishing the trade route for the energy transition. So these partners here are redefining the way in which we are advancing or not in the energy transition strategy. Okay. So I'm going now to deep into a very specific mineral for Latin America, and it's gold. So we're going to ask, is gold a critical mineral? We didn't saw it here. Like we had a list of those that we are considering critical minerals, and we don't see gold clearly highlighted as one of the critical minerals. But then we'll see that the answer is yes. Gold is high conductive and it avoids corrosion. So it helps electronic system to have a better performance. And we have a limited geographical resources that create supply chain vulnerability. So we need to necessarily start thinking in the production concentrated areas in specific regions. So under these ideas, gold, yes, is a critical mineral. So how or what is the role of gold in energy transition technologies? In solar technologies, it helps building circuit for photovoltaic panels. Electric vehicles, it helps reliable performance in the applications. Renewable infrastructure in the control circuits, and nanoparticles are part of the new improvements we are working and using gold for in order to develop new technologies for renewables. Okay? So then we have this particular situation. It's something that I call green extractivism. Green extractivism means that clean technology drives to environmental destruction. So what we have here, environmental sustainability, particularly through energy transition, is taking us to an intensified resources extraction. So sometimes our climate change solutions can modify the patterns and behaviors related to specific sectors such as mining. And these sectors such as mining in jurisdictions like Latin America jurisdiction will bring huge challenges as some of those we're going to see now. So definitely, decarbonization demands more mineral, deforestation, water contamination, and in some cases, human rights violations in Latin America. And the price of clean energy in many cases is paid using mercury and blood for extractive industries. So definitely, these environmental and social costs are externalized to the global south where I'm from, to our Latin American jurisdictions, where are the niche and where are the key natural resources are allocated in the high industrial and commercial levels to meet the demand for natural resources. So, this is very uncomfortable to talk about clean energy. All of us agree in the necessity of looking and moving in the pathway of energy transition. But definitely is not a call against clean energy. On the other side is a way to starting to identify which are certain of the problems and starting to figure out which can be some of the solutions to this, okay? So we're gonna see a very short video. This video gonna show you and gonna introduce us to some of the major problems related to criminal activities in our jurisdictions, and also going to introduce us to the concept of illegal mining, okay? For some of you, this may be quite sensitive because it have an intervention of the military force over illegal activities, but no worries. At least in this video, no one was killed and everyone was safe, okay? But it was a military intervention, okay? So let's see this, and then we'll advance with the concept of illegal mining.
Targeted by authorities. Mining equipment in the Amazon rainforest is blown to pieces. Alongside Brazil and backed by the US, Colombia is cracking down on illegal gold mining.
Economically, illegal mines generate more than $2 billion per month. They also pollute rivers with 100,000 grams of mercury per month, directly affecting 68 million litres of water.
The precious yellow metal is being mined at the expense of the Amazon. To find gold, miners dredge rivers, using mercury to bind to gold particles. After burning off the mercury, solid gold is left behind. It's a process that leads to soil erosion, which causes deforestation and contaminates the waterways of some of the world's most biodiverse nations.
The illicit extraction of minerals takes place in Panama, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, and parts of Latin America too.
And it's not just the environment that's suffering.
The situation is of enormous concern to indigenous peoples because these heavy metals, such as mercury and others, cause a series of effects on people's bodies.
In the upper Amazonian river basins, Bolivia's indigenous communities mainly eat fish. A report by an organisation of indigenous peoples of La Paz in June found that 75% of indigenous people in northern Bolivia have mercury levels above international standards.
During this time, we've been going from one crisis to another. Not only the mercury, but now there is another crisis because of the fires and El Niño.
A serious concern, and one of many being felt in the Amazon. Madeline Lou Booth, ABC News.
So, as we saw, there is a very strong situation going on.
We're going to dive straight in with our main
Okay,
story.
that's not my video.
This happened.
Overnight, ABC pulling late night talk.
Okay, let's close this one. Okay, so as we saw in the video, there's some very particular situations of destruction, illegal activities related to mining, and in many cases to mining for energy purposes. So somehow, illegal mining in Latin America has become a very bad issue for all the countries involved, particularly in countries related or nearby the Amazon, which is the heart of the world, as we all know. So what's illegal mining? Illegal mining is the unauthorized extraction, processing, commercialization of mineral resources without the proper permits from the government. So in our jurisdictions, governments are the owners of all natural resources. Difference by here. But that makes it necessary for mining companies to go to the government, signed a contract, and develop mining activities under high standards in all conditions. But this is not always what happens when we have illegal mining activities. As we can see, there is no mining permissions nor licenses, and this means that there is some links with environmental, labor, and taxation laws that affect and include, of course, the development of a criminal activity. So, this is the legal framework in some of the biggest countries in Latin America, and in all of them, within the criminal code, we will see that there is a criminalization of unauthorized exploitation of mineral resources or illegal resources. So in Colombia, Article 328 of the Criminal Code establish the penalties and jail for those who are developing illegal activities. In Brazil, Article 55 Environmental Crimes Law, Law 9605 from 1998. In Peru, the Article 303 of the Criminal Code. In Mexico, Article 344. And in Argentina, Article 191 of the Criminal Code. So all the countries are agreed to say illegal mining is a criminal activity. That means you're going to have jail or fines in order to avoid those activities in the jurisdictions. But in some cases, we need to say and give a little stop. Illegal mining is not referring to artisanal mining, which is something different. Artisanal mining is labor-intensive mineral extraction conducted by individuals, families, or small communities using traditional methods or low-technology methods, okay? So they're a complete different universe. One is a sustainable practice that communities can develop as organized groups, and the other one is a criminal activity that basically use mercury and use toxic pollutants that affect rivers and livelihood within those jurisdictions. So what's the difference? The scale. In these cases, artisanal mining will be small-scale operation with manual and traditional activities and complying standards as not using mercury in the development of the mining activity. Okay? So this is a chart that shows us the legal status. Illegal mining is illegal and criminalized under the law. Artisanal or small-scale mining is legal, but it requires to be registered in front of the government and also to have a roadmap for the use of the environmental resources related to the projects. Also, we have permits or authorizations. Permits are required even in the case of legal small-scale mining. And also, we need to say that administrative penalties are not part of the sanctions for artisanal mining in our jurisdictions. So there is a hiding criminal economy there that's fighting or that's setting goal, fighting the produce and commercialization of cocaine in our jurisdictions. So that's the level of the competition now. Two criminal activities in same jurisdiction in the Amazon area fighting between each other to see which one's going to prevail. And under these ideas, organized crime groups have been evolving in more complicated structures or criminal structures, taking into account that these, after, for sure, the goal is trade into the international market, is not traceable, and we don't, for sure, have ways to control the illegal mining activities. Okay? So, we have huge environmental destruction, huge affections to human rights, and huge economic consequences in the illegal mining. And this is the map of the critical crisis. 85% of the gold, of the total production gold in Colombia, is part of illegal mining activities. And it has destroyed 500 plus acres daily for the development of this illegal activity. 23,881 acres have been lost between 2021 and 2023 in Peru deforestation. Brazil indigenous lands had been destroyed in 4 indigenous territories, which means 4,219 indigenous people has to move out from their jurisdictions because of illegal mining activities in their neighborhoods. And 86% of Venezuela gold is illegal, which means we have 140,000 acres deforested in between 2016 and 2020. And it's really interesting to see that each gram of gold that we extract from the mining sites means that we're using in illegal activities 4.63 grams of mercury into waterways, which means mercury levels in those rivers increase 34 times the safety limits for mercury in Amazonian waters itself. So these are some cases for those who are interested in deepening the particular situations that are happening there. This is a picture, a recent picture of the Peru Madre de Dios care. The Peru Madre de Dios case is an open wound in which, despite the use of military force, illegal mining activities has persisted over the past years and have carried out many environmental degradation scenarios, such as this one we can see in the picture. In Colombia, we have multiple regions, such as Antioquia, Cauca, Chocó, Nariño, Amazon, in which, for example, near to the Atrato River, who was recognized the first time in the history, we recognize the river as a subject of rights. We don't see law enforcement in order to avoid illegal activities. So there we have huge devastation, such as in this picture, where Atrato River is still, despite the Constitutional Court decision, being affected by criminal actions. And the Yanomami territory, where the garimpeiros is illegal miners, have been displacing this indigenous community itself and involve thousands and thousands of people migrating because of illegal mining activities, okay? So those are certain cases. So, why artificial intelligence is important here? As I said before, illegal mining is a criminal activity itself. So we are using artificial intelligence as a tool to help controlling, monitoring, and sanctioning mining sites which don't have the conditions of legality. So what we are doing, satellite monitoring, supply chain tracking, predictive analytics, and automated surveillance. These systems need for sure strengthening or to be strengthened within the international frameworks. They need to be promoted between the international cooperation system and be also massively applied, for example, in jurisdiction as in the Amazon area. So for example, and this is a very quick pathway of what has happened since the year 2020. In 2020, we start talking about AI in illegal mining based on satellite monitoring. So what we'll do is something look like this. We used to use satellite images to monitoring mining operations and also seeing the changes within the jurisdictions between one year and another. So for example, this is the same picture of this river area. April 2018, we had this satellite picture. And then in October 2020, we had this picture of the same jurisdiction. When we see this from the satellite image, we can recognize that definitely there is something happening. And the condition of the soil, the devastation of the environment, and the deforestation of the area will necessarily tell authorities that there is something illegal happening there. Under that premises, we'll need to definitely have a legal intervention to stop criminal activities. In these early stages in 2020, we used to have, of course, the need for significant human intervention to analyze these images and see in which cases there were legal or illegal activities. But this has been advancing. In 2020, we passed very fast. As we can see, artificial intelligence moved really fast. Like between 5 years, we passed from analyzing satellite images to a very advanced stages nowadays. So 2021, these images that we have here were directly analyzed by artificial intelligence. So we would upload the satellite images, and the artificial intelligence would say, this is an illegal mining site. Why? The use of the soil is wrong. The use of the quality or the quality of the water in the picture is different. And also we can have indicative or estimated use of mercurium in those jurisdictions. So we have automatical process satellite imagery. And also they start building patterns to identify or to give authorities tools to identify in which cases the landscape changes are anomaly and they need definitely a legal intervention or military intervention to solve the problem there. In 2022, we had pattern recognition breakout. This system takes historical analysis, it takes all the satellite picture over the last 3 years, and it helps us identify anomaly detection using algorithms and start creating these operational patterns. So we will have all the legal titles and all the grids that you can see here from the satellite picture, and then they will start focusing in the areas where there are high concentration of mining activities. And it will start saying, between 1 month and another, we have these amount of changes within the jurisdiction, which means maybe or not there are some kind of criminal activity. 2023, real-time monitoring. So we have all the satellite images, and at some point, we start creating alarms. So when we see a change in the course of the river, in the quality of the water, in the use of the soil, we're definitely going to receive an alarm as authority, as legal authority, and the alarm will be received by the military and also by the courts to say something illegal is happening there. And they will definitely display the use of the government strength in order to respond this 24/7 monitoring to the capabilities. 2024, this is really interesting because we were using satellite images, we were seeing the pictures, seeing the differences in the quality of the water, in the course of the river, but now we're starting to talk about predictive models. So what's happening here? Using artificial intelligence, we can forecast the potential areas and also see where is the next hotspot where illegal activity is going to happen. So we take this initial image, for example here, we use the references from the past, and we can say illegal activities start very small here, and it's possible or it will spread in this area that you're seeing here in yellow. So this area in yellow is this area that have been affected by illegal mining 3 months after. So this is a picture 3 months before, a picture 3 months after, which under the predictive analysis, they said 3 months before, the next spot gonna be there. And it actually were. So this case study is the Colombian mining monitoring, which is named COMIMO, and it's linked with academia. Universities are developing the technology, and they're linking it now with military force to have a quick response and prior response to illegal activities in itself. Predictive cases. So we are seeing the future from the illegal mining. And now, this year, we have been working in comprehensive artificial intelligence and Internet of the Things integration. We are trying to integrate the surveillance, and also we are using smart GPS systems. That mean every kind of machinery or any excavator that is introduced into the country have a very specific GPS that use artificial intelligence and will reflect each of the movements, the ownership, and the trespass of these technologies that are usually related to mining operations. So, okay. So, I'm going to show you very fast some additional case studies and the names of the projects in case you want to go and see them by yourself. For example, we have the Amazon Monitoring Map Project. This Amazon Monitoring Map Project, based on deforestation tracking, are revealing which are the hotspots for illegal mining. So the picture of this implies the use of deep learning models multi-sensor integration, and temporal analysis, which have a very comprehensive tracking of where are the next hotspots for the development of illegal mining. Which are some of the strengths and limitations of this project itself? It have a huge coverage over the whole entire Amazon rainforest. It have very frequent updates, and it have clear and evidence-based insights. But it has some also limitations from the weather conditions. Depending on the visibility of the satellite, you'll have proper or not information. And also, there's a necessity for ground verification. Because sometimes, as how we said before, illegal mining can be confounded with artisanal mining. And artisanal mining is developed by local communities, so we could never order a military intervention that could go and affect communities in their territories. Another case. This is the specific case of the application for the Rio Pure National Park in the southeastern Colombian Amazon. And this is how it started. In November 2024, they identify which were some of the spots that had mining activities within the Pure River. As you can see, the red spots were those where they had dredges in 2024 and the yellow spots in 2025. This was a flyover photo using drones, and they identified 29 active dredges along the river. And in April 2025, they identified additional 27 dredges ubicated over the river course. So after this, using this system, they went further and take satellite pictures even of the facilities. And with this information, they definitely give basis for the authorities to make legal intervention and destroy, as we saw in the video, all these illegal infrastructures. Okay? An additional one, the Global Forest Watch. It's a real-time monitoring, a data information platform, and it looks like this. So what we have here is that...
The Global Forest Watch
Oh, let's go back. So the Global Forest Watch is seeing what's happening year by year in satellite images, and they're sending messages to governments and authorities in which should be the critical areas they should focus, having control, monitoring, and surveillance in order to avoid illegal or extractive industries. And they share this map year by year, giving us a highlight of how it works. So for example, they have 10 years creating these kind of charts, so you can have a complete historical background of which is the performance of the specific regions under the forestal watch they are doing. So let's see this one very fast.
The Global Forest Watch platform provides early deforestation alerts, which are generated from satellite imaging interpretation.
Okay.
In order to identify, to analyze and document deforestation caused by mining activities. In the animation, you can see the Madre de Dios region in Peru. You can follow up on the deforestation activities of the last 2 years using the Planet high-resolution images to understand the extension of the damage caused by illegal mining activities in this region.
Okay. So we see, using artificial intelligence once more, we have a very specific case. Okay, so which international legal framework we should be considering related to the use of artificial intelligence within communities and between very specific and particular jurisdictions like those where illegal mining are happening? Definitely we need to start thinking about the Minamata Convention. Minamata Convention is an international treaty that says we should avoid in all ways the use of mercury. And this convention, Latin America have been one of the most active participants, signing and ratifying those conventions in internal laws that make strict controls to mercury imports and use be happening within the economic itself. The Escazú Agreement, which is a very specific tool that has been created with a regional conception. Escazú Agreement states that, for sure, communities should have access to information public participation and justice in environment matters. That means communities can require information to government or to companies related to any kind of projects, but particularly also artificial intelligence surveillance and monitoring, in case those information are being used with other intentions, okay? So that should be very transparent and very clear. The International Labour Convention 169, it represents and it indicates, as we are talking, we are in the Amazon. So the Amazon have a lot of indigenous people, a lot of indigenous communities. So by this, we need to say that definitely we need to have free, prior, and informed consent for the development of activities that could affect somehow the life ways or the traditional practices and customs within those indigenous territories. And last but not least, we need to have in mind the due diligence guidance. We need to talk about the standards for responsible mining supply chains and also the guidance for the companies in the world purchase of gold worldwide. So, just to conclude, Professor, 2 minutes more. This is the final map of what we have today. But we need to start thinking as lawyers of some of the challenges we can be facing by using artificial intelligence in very specific cases and with sensitive or very vulnerable communities. Communities and indigenous communities in Latin America are not always looked with good eyes because they're stopping, or for some, they're obstacle to development projects. So in order to avoid this, we'll try to figure out in some governments, based on their political positions or not, ways to avoid the use of all these tools we talk about in the international legal toolkit. So definitely, the ethical principle and the use of AI would require to introduce the concept of prior and informed consent. We need to see in which cases necessarily we should be talking about the use of the self-determination principles in order to advance with the use of artificial intelligence, even though they are for illegal mining control. Also, protection and data rights, and also transparency and explainability standards. These models need to give us rules, or we from the regulation, or we from the sandboxes should start thinking about the rules we're going to apply, even though we're using it for a proper purpose, for the management and the ownership of those informations. And also, we need to start thinking in the role that communities should have in the application and the use of governance models where artificial intelligence can help build additional solutions for communities, not just based on illegal mining prosecution. So, just to conclude, some final reflections. Artificial intelligence will not save the Amazon by itself. It needs, for sure, a great articulation between all the stakeholders. We need to start talking with governments, we need to start talking with companies, military forces, and also communities to build a very clear scenario in where transparency be the base of the decision-making in each and all the cases. Also, we need to start thinking in the ethics and justice related to artificial intelligence. Of course, the voice of the court and the communities will be a shield against exploitation, but governance can no longer ignore the necessity to make communities part of the decision-making, even in artificial intelligence scenarios, even in strategic security decision-making. And last but not least, it's time to use technology to avoid or not repeat the old extractive injustice. This is a way, an opportunity to guarantee, using this technology, a manner to conduct more environmental justice and community empowerment in particular cases like in Latin America. So thank you very much again for listening. I hope you enjoy it. And now we're open for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's see if I can get my Thank you so much, Lyndon,
Thank you,
for that
Professor.
outstanding presentation. Really a nice balance of despair and hope, which is kind of what environmental law is in many manifestations, and energy law and mining law as well. But also very sweeping in scope, which I really appreciated, especially for all the students in the room. There was one slide there. Can you get
let's go back
up? Because we have many students from international environmental law
nice.
in the room, and go back a few.
I guess is this one.
No, not that one.
This one.
Yeah. So when I see this slide, I'm thinking, Professor Gismondi, an exam question waiting to happen here. So I mean, thinking through how you've got a complex fact pattern involving artificial intelligence and potential mining violations on the ground, and you think through how particular legal frameworks might apply, and you analyze through how those frameworks might apply to this particular scenario. And it's an interesting mix of both hard law and soft law components, environmental and human rights components of international legal frameworks. So I think it's a great educational tool that you've provided us, and I'm grateful for that. And we also have perhaps students from human rights and environment in the class as well. They're writing papers, so I think this is a fantastic paper topic if you're still struggling to think about what you want to write about. And it's certainly something that is very much at the intersection of both international and domestic governance, which is something that moves through a lot of the environmental and energy challenges we're facing in the US and Latin America. That connection between what our international and environmental frameworks are doing, if they're working together or not so much. I certainly want to open the floor for questions. Claudia, if you can tell me if there's any online, we can take those later. But very eager to hear your questions for Professor Lyndon here and start the dialogue. Yes.
I apologize, I can't remember the framing you had, but you had a phrase where the energy is kind of, thank you so much, making kind of a vicious cycle of the energy, the extraction. As the AI has been growing as a tool, are you guys also implementing any metrics to make sure that to support the AI itself isn't eventually contributing to that vicious cycle?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. So we have been seeing the impacts also of AI in the environmental degradation itself. And in jurisdictions like ours that are very rich in water resources, but also dangerous in the management of those water resources, when we put AI as a topic, and we talk about AI as a topic that could be a possible solution, there's always voices that say, we shouldn't be seeing it like that. We should be seeing it as well.
Sorry, if you can go back to the front of the room so everyone can hear.
We are seeing it as the problem as well. So we are starting, we haven't yet, but we are trying to include metrics on that topic in order to see which can be the links and somehow which can be the public policy responses in order to avoid those externalities that are part of the solution we are trying to propose. So that's what we are in right now. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Oh.
If you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Professor Caroline Seacott here at the GW Law School, and I loved your presentation. That was very interesting to learn about what is going on and that vicious cycle in particular. I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about what legal mining looks like in these scenarios, just to have a comparator, because, for example, I visited mountaintop removal legal mining sites in the United States, and they have a kind of a large and devastating impact, and even the remediation we have under statutes there's fundamental changes that happen. And I was just curious what the legal landscape for the mining looks like in Latin America.
Okay, thank you very much. So legal mining in Colombia are principally developed by American, Canadian, and Australian companies. But they have in the regulation very high standards from the international due diligence and international high standards quality for the development of the activities. And within the jurisdiction, the Constitutional Court have established very high environmental guidance and binding decisions, which makes from phase 0 of the projects, before we sign the contract, to phase ending of the project, we have a complete environmental tool that guide each decision making and step by the process. Of course, we have huge environmental impacts during the life of the project, and itself can have very significant consequences with the environment, with the communities who are surrounding the area. But at the end of the project, there is, based on the Constitutional Court provision, a binding condition that there must be a proper abandonment and restoration of the entire operation area. So our mining contracts could last between 30, 40, or 50 years, depending the contract model. But after that, they'll have a 15 years compensating scenario where we have to put back everything to stage 0. So you have to make the complete abandonment and the complete restoration of the environment or the ecosystems you are working in. And, well, right now situations are very particular in Colombia with legal mining activities. But there is something I'd just like to leave on the table, or left on the table. What's happening in Colombia is that, of course, legal mining go through the entire process. So they'll start getting into the country, bring the packages for investments, making all the geological activity. And at the end, they find the resource and they announce the projects. And somehow, many communities, and in some cases, armed groups, will present many obstacles to avoid the project to develop in legal terms. But if you go to that area 3 or 4 years after, you'll see that it becomes a site for illegal mining. So they map the legal projects, they figure out the geological information, where is the minerals, where the minerals are, and then from the legal activity, after they block the projects, they go and do illicit extractive industry without no standards. With the pictures I show you, using mercury, using no criteria, and don't having any environmental tool to guide the process from moment 0 to ending itself. So that's a huge challenge we are facing today, because legal mining have a lot of social opposition itself, but no one is saying anything about illegal mining as strong as it should be. And that's where sometimes we should say, when you put it in a balance, what could be better, or what should be better in jurisdiction as ours? Thank you. Oh, hi, Herb.
Yeah, you need the mic.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Awasai Aziz. I'm an adjunct here at GW teaching human rights and the environment. So I'm so happy some of my students are in the room to hear your fantastic presentation. I think I took a picture of every slide because it was
I'll share it.
Super informative. I think this maybe might be building on the last comment you made, or maybe you answered it a little bit, but I'm just curious how effective enforcement has been, or what are some enforcement challenges in implementing these AI models? I mean, I recognize it's also a very recent, you know, kinds of development, but yeah, what is enforcement looking like on the ground?
It's very hard. Thank you for the question. It's very hard because illegal activities are way bigger than government strength right now. So government strength means that military force, in so many cases, cannot tackle the criminal organizations that are behind illegal mining. It's not something that we're talking about 3 or 4 criminals doing a little small activity. It's something in major scales that have a huge economy background that is financing those activities. And the capabilities for response and direct response from the military force are very limited. So we are not having the proper responses. We are doing predictive models, and the strength of the state is not capable to go there and tackle the problem from the root. So there's always an expansion of the problem all around unfortunately, river areas, water areas, which are also connected to where our communities are based and living their life. So I think strengthening the government itself and the military force itself to have not just the technology and the information, but also having tools to respond to those situations would definitely make it more effective in the long term. Yeah. Oh.
Hello. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very engaging and really, really interesting to hear. My name is Margaret. I work for the Environmental Law Institute here in DC. I just had a question about the use of AI technology and how the courts are responding to it. So context, some of the work I do is with the Climate Judiciary Project, and so we educate judges on climate science, more or less, so that they're able to, when it comes across their courts in litigation, they understand what the science means. And so very similarly, because AI is this kind of newer technology, how have you seen, at least in Latin America, how courts are responding to it? If they're not responding to it yet, how do you think judges in particular will take this type of information coming into their courts?
Thank you very much. That's a really good question, because just 2 weeks ago, we had a very interesting decision in which a court took one satellite image as part of a proof in a criminal process. So there were some doubts about how due process that is, because we're taking a satellite, the chain of custody of the proof, all of the situation regarded to the rights of defense and contradiction. But then the court in this first case say, okay, this satellite image used and understand and interpreted by artificial intelligence is very clear, and there is no doubt, no reasonable doubt that there is a criminal activity based on this image. So was the base of the decision and the fundamentals of the decision that making or had those criminal into jail in that moment in particular. So we are definitely using it. We're opening the window to have different uses, not just as a way of decision making or prediction or just monitoring or just for academic purposes. It's going beyond and being part of decision making within our jurisdiction as well. So that will be growing in a lot. And of course, we're going to see also in the upcoming, on the short term, decisions which don't consider these images as part of the proof. So we're going to see how the balance and how the Constitutional Court at the end going to define which should be the correct pathway to advance in these kind of interpretations. Okay? Okay. Yep.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. My question is, what does engagement, local ownership, and the democratic process look like on a legal level? So how are indigenous communities engaged with and kind of involved in the process?
Sure. But particularly for artificial intelligence or in general?
In general, so more state-based laws.
Okay. So indigenous communities under Convention 169 of the International Labor Organization, it's there, have right to be consulted when there are rules of law that have impact on their territories or in the ways they live. So under this framework, majority of the cases where we have mining activities in legal frameworks will necessarily have to take the project to indigenous communities and under the prior consultation, have them with clear information, transparency, get into agreement related to the use of the land and the influence area based on two criteria. First, the environmental criteria, where we're going to have some environmental compensation for the damage that is happening in the ecosystems. And second, from the socio-cultural impact of those decisions or those contracts. Socio-economic impact means that projects, independent from taxes, royalties, etc., will have to make significant investments within indigenous territories to help bettering quality of life in certain or particular areas. So in so many cases, we'll see mining or legal mining companies working, building hospitals, building schools, working together with the communities, establishing pathway for training and incorporating local providers into the supply chain for the project. And that would be part of the entire compensation model that we have back home. But on the other hand, in illegal activities, well, there is no kind of conversation. So at some point, armed groups who are now behind these industries are forcing communities to work in the illegal mining. Why? Because when we send the image of the satellite picture, we'll see that there are some members of indigenous communities. In those cases, armed force cannot go into the community and have any kind of control or, as we saw in the videos, any kind of intervention with violence. So we'll necessarily need to take out those members of communities and sit in the table with them, try to get them out of the illegal activity, and then have the state intervention during the process. So it makes it quite tricky because at some point they are being part of something that is criminal, but we also have the state protection that will avoid the military intervention to avoid those situations. So you need to see like the entire map of how prior consultation can become something very relevant and very useful for communities, and at the other opposite side, it could also be a tool to limit state intervention and state legal activities. Okay? Okay, any question? That's it.
I have one.
Oh.
In the U.S., we're experiencing a bit of a federal government crisis of environmental regulation. That's the understatement of the year. And but we are encouraged that there's state and local governments in our country that can help move things forward for environmental protection, even with an absence of federal leadership. Is there anything going on in Colombia that you may be experiencing a similar lack of federal leadership in addressing some of these illegal mining concerns, but are there subnational governance systems that are helping keep things in check?
Okay, our model is very different because Colombia is a central state government, traditional European vision. So we have the president, we have the Ministry of Environment, we have the Ministry of Mining and Energy, we have the Ministry of Defense. So all the line of the hierarchy line in the organization of the institutional structure doesn't allow under constitutional nor legal provisions for local authorities to use force without the direction of the higher levels. So the President of the Republic would be the person in charge of leading, guiding, and defining which are the extent or which are the strength of the military force in certain jurisdictions. So then local authorities cannot be able to decide over those particular cases. Of course, we're trying to use, and with the help of the local policy authorities, to build monitoring and very specific local initiative, but from the basic framework itself and the organization of the state, it would be really hard to go against, and it could be even illegal to go against the rules that the President of the Republic is doing. Yeah. Yep. Oh, Department of Energy and Environment.
Yeah, for the district government. So my name is Kevin Gerke, or Thatch Gerke, and I really liked your slide that talked about the different minerals and resources and where they're coming from and who's processing them and stuff. And I think that speaks a lot to the political climate right now and a lot of the stuff going on behind the political background. So I wanted to commend you on that. But then I also had a question regarding energy as a human right and how these communities feel, given that many of them don't have access to a lot of these technologies that are being created with the resources that are being mined in their homes and destroying their homelands or being forced to work in these mines. So if you had any any thoughts or anything about what these communities are feeling and saying about that dichotomy, I guess.
Really interesting, because not only having mining next to them and having opportunities for energy access, but also that's why I set in that strategically in that presentation the phrase energy transition shouldn't leave anyone behind. Why? because that's also the situation with renewable energies. Communities or local communities, fortunately, they're very rich in natural resources. And we have huge not in my backyard movements back home. So no one wants to have, everyone wants energy transition, but no one wants to have a wind farm next to their homes. No one wants to have huge acres of solar panels set next to their places. It reduces the price of your land. It spoils your landscape. It doesn't make your tourism activities possible anymore. It doesn't make your agricultural activities possible anymore. So we're trying to make it happen, but really far from each one of us. And there's where communities are standing the consequences of energy transition itself. So now we have movements from social opposition trying to also avoid energy transition projects within their jurisdiction. And that's make it really hard. Like everyone wants energy transition. The laws are there, the targets are there. The international the international rule of law is saying you have to move in this pathway. 2030 is right around the corner. 2050 is right around the corner. And then no one wants to sacrifice their places and their comfort for that. But when we go into the communities, it's even harder because communities are standing the consequences. So you would see energy transmission infrastructures. You will see solar panels in their backyards, but they cannot be connected directly to the facilities. You need to have a commercial operator, an agent of the market who will be dispatching energy directly to them. So it's not that easy that we will make a solar park and then connect community to it. It doesn't work like that. Because those investments and that energy is already sell into an energy market. So the energy market is built in that way that energy services require the proper agents for commercialization and distribution of energy sources. So then you cannot, as government, you cannot, as local government, you cannot, as community, access to those facilities that you have right next to you. So when you go, I hope you all visit Colombia soon, you'll see the huge transformation or the huge grid lines all over the country next to very small communities. And when you go into the community, they don't have energy resources. And they're standing the consequences of having the facilities next to them, electromagnetic emissions, sound pollution, for example. In La Guajira area, when we go to the north of Colombia, we have already wind farms. And I don't know if you have already stand up against a wind farm. It's really noisy. It's really complicated to live on a daily basis, 24 hours, listening to that sound all day in your head. And at some point, it goes also against the way they use their land, because their land is it's something really important for indigenous people. So the use of land and the purposes of land should be settled for some purposes under their cosmovision. But from a hierarchical level, we're saying you must stand the consequences, even though you're not going to get any benefit directly from it. So it's really hard. So I hope you also be able to see this in another space. We could be talking about how there are no access to energy, even though there are energy infrastructure for that, because of the way the model and the legal framework around the energy model have been built, not just in Colombia, all around Latin America. So that's why we're now talking about, for example, more domestic solutions. For example, communitary energy projects. So we call them comunidades energéticas, energy communitary project. That means communities are the owners and the administrators, operators, and are in charge of the maintenance of energy facilities. So they are becoming as part of or as an active agent into the electric market. And with that role and position, they can then interconnect between them and provide solution or clean solution, because they will have solar panels in their roofs or have a specific land established just for the development of the energy center, the power generation, and then they can have advantage of those natural resources, okay? So that's the very critical scenario we have.
We're going to have to conclude here. We are just on time for continuing the conversation over some delicious vegan food for our reception in the room next door. So please join me in thanking Professor Lyndon.
Thank you very much.